The Loving Spoonful in September '67, they were one of the first rock bands to record with the Ampex 16-track tape recorder, and they released a couple of songs like 6 O'Clock, She's Still a Mystery to Me, and Younger Generation. John Sebastian left the group in June '68 to go solo. He had been offered the chance to join Crosby, Stills, and Nash. He was good friends with all three of those musicians, but he turned that down. He decided he wanted to put out a solo album first, and he wanted to sign with Warner Brothers' Reprise Records division. They were kind of leading the vanguard of singer-songwriters in the late '60s and early '70s. They had already released Joni Mitchell's first album in March '68. Van Morrison's first album came out in '68 on Reprise, and Neil Young's first solo album came out in November of '68. So John Sebastian could have been right at the head of that pack of singer-songwriters, but MGM Records thought that The Loving Spoonful still owed them an album, so they fought with Warner Brothers in court over the rights to release this record, and it got tied up for a year and a half. Finally came out in January of 1970. The album does have some good tracks on it. It's got Dallas Taylor playing drums, who would go on to perform with Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Harvey Brooks on bass. David Crosby and Graham Nash do some harmonies on some of the tracks. Stephen Stills plays a little guitar. It's got a pedal steel player, Buddy Emmons, featured on a country song called Rainbow All Over Your Blues. A guy named Buzzy Linhart plays vibes on a jazzy tune called Magical Connection. He does a solo acoustic remake of the Loving Spoonful song You're a Big Boy Now. And he does a very heavily orchestrated version of the waltz I Had a Dream, which was featured on the Woodstock soundtrack. While he was waiting for his album to be released, his manager, Paul Rothchild, told him about the Woodstock Festival that was going to be happening up in New York and suggested he go check it out. So he flew out there and was able to get backstage. And after the rainstorm, when a lot of the equipment couldn't be used, the promoters of the concert asked John Sebastian if he'd like to go out and do an acoustic set just to entertain the crowd while the rest of the equipment was dried off. So he borrowed an acoustic guitar from Tim Hardin and went out and performed a set of songs from his solo album and an old Spoonful song. He did Darling Be Home Soon. I Had a Dream that he performed was the opening track on the Woodstock soundtrack album, and the song Younger Generation became one of the highlights of the film when it came out. So finally his first album was released in January 1970, and it reached number 20 on the charts. He also performed on Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young's album and played harmonica on the song Deja Vu. And he performed with the Doors on the album Morrison Hotel. That's John Sebastian playing the harp on Roadhouse Blues, and he's really wailing on that track. I have all the Loving Spoonful albums or songs on this compilation, Loving Spoonful Greatest Hits. That's a good way to go. They're all 24-bit remastered. It's got 26 tracks on it, and they were primarily a singles band. So a compilation on this is probably a better way to get a hold of their material than picking up the individual albums. I've got John Sebastian's Warner Brothers album on this box set by Rhino called Faithful Virtue. And besides the 4 albums he released for Warner Brothers, it's also got his entire concert at Woodstock and a couple of live tracks from the Winterland Arena in San Francisco. So that's got some nice bonus material on it. MGM released a bootleg live performance in 1971 of a concert John Sebastian had done up in upstate New York. Very primitive recording equipment, poor quality album. So in response, John Sebastian released a live album called Cheapo Cheapo Productions Presents Real Live John Sebastian. That came out in April '71. contains several Loving Spoonful songs and a couple of other originals. It's a good album. It's just him on guitar with Paul Harris playing piano, and a lot of dialogue in between songs with the crowd. It's a good listen. In August '71, he released an album called The Four of Us. Very polished, consistent efforts. It's got a song on it called Apple Hill that probably should have been a big hit on the radio. Let's see, in 1974 he released an album called Tarzana Kid. That reunited him with his producer from the Loving Spoonful, Eric Jacobson. It's got David Grisman playing mandolin on a track. It's got Emmylou Harris, Ry Cooder, David Lindley. Lowell George is on this album from Little Feat. It's got a very relaxed kind of a vibe to it. Kind of acoustic, almost sounds like back porch music. He does a cover of a Loving Spoonful song called Wild About My Lovin'. If any of you are familiar with Jack Van Breen, who does the equipment reviews for Totally Guitars, I saw his band a few weeks ago at JJ's Blues, where I hang out. He's got a group called the Dan Goes, and they covered Wild About My Lovin' that night, so I thought that was pretty cool. It's got a little jug band piece on it called Friends Again, and a little blues song, Singing the Blues. John Sebastian's last album for Warner Brothers came out in 1976. He had been asked to write the theme song for a television program called Welcome Back, Kotter, and that premiered in September 1975 and was a big hit. Warner Brothers released the single, and it became his last #1 hit in May of 1976. It went gold, and they put out an album, and it's got a song on it called She's Funny that certainly also could have been a big hit on the radio. It's got a little blues number called Warm Baby, country song called A Song a Day in Nashville. It's got Jeff Baxter playing pedal steel on that song. He does an old Spoonful song called Didn't Want to Have to Do It that he plays like kind of a late night chill out. And then the album ends with a instrumental where he gets to stretch out on harmonica one last time. Let This Be Our Time to Get Along. John Sebastian continues to perform in concert and continues to do side work for other musicians. He's performed on albums with Bonnie Raitt, Judy Collins, Gordon Lightfoot, Graham Parker, Dolly Parton. In 2000, the Loving Spoonful were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Well, that's all I've got. I just wanted to bring attention to another artist that probably was not as successful as he should have been. You can have the talent, you can put out the good albums, but you know, that's not always enough. And that was certainly not enough in the case of John Sebastian. He should have been much more popular, I think, than he was able to do. Anyway, thank you for hanging out with me. This is Steve at the Listening Post, and we will see you again next time.